Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here. Another field day. And I'm subbing for Krishna Subramanian, COO of Komprise and co-founder. She's a little bit under the weather, so I'm going to present the slides today. And what we'll do today, and by the way, my name is Kumar Goswami, CEO and co-founder, one of the other co-founders of Komprise. What I'll do today is give you a little bit of a background on Komprise, what we do, how we do it, and then we're going to actually back that up with a demo where you'll be able to see how intuitive and easy it is to use our product. And then we're going to actually do a chalk talk on one of the key technical components behind Komprise that I think really is patented. It really sets us apart from a lot of the other data management solutions that are out there. So then, how did we come up with Komprise? What was behind that? Well, before we wrote a single line of code, we went out and talked to a bunch of customers. Anybody that would spend time with us, half an hour with a CIO of IT, a CIO, or 15, 20 minutes with a VP of IT infrastructure, whoever would be willing to give us some golden gems of information. And what we learned from all of this was, number one, these guys were drowning in data. Massive influx of data, and bunch of that data was that purple stuff that you're seeing on that screen. It's unstructured data. And what is unstructured data? Well, if you pick out your phone and you take a picture, that's unstructured data. If you're going to a hospital and you get an MRI, that's unstructured data. If you've got a doorbell application that does video surveillance, all that video, that's unstructured data. So it's massive growth in unstructured data because the world is becoming more and more digitized. And as a result of that, when you're seeing that purple, IDC says that we're going to go to 175 zettabytes by 2025. And 85 to 90% of that data is purple. It's unstructured. And what the issue that the enterprise is facing today is, while that data is growing at an exorbitant rate, they have to accommodate that data, manage that data with a flat budget. Their budgets aren't growing. That's one of the fundamental issues that they're facing. And I think one of the reasons for that, and because of that, I would say, is why the adoption of the cloud as storage is really, accelerating. And so the enterprises that we deal with, the bulk of them are hybrid. So they have on-premises storage and cloud storage. In addition to that, most of them are multi-cloud. They are not going to put all of their data with one cloud provider. So what does that mean? That means multiple silos of data that you got to manage. It means actually a more complex, more diverse IT infrastructure that you have to handle and deal with. And yet, again, with a flat budget. And on top of that, these guys are under pressure to be able to provide IT as a service, be more agile, be more efficient, and not only store that data and protect that data, but also be able to monetize that data and be able to extract value from that data. That's the kind of pressure they're under. And having heard all these stories from them and having understood what their issues were, we use that as the fundamental basis behind Komprise. And so what we realized, what we had to do was to create a layer, not just within storage, but outside of storage, that can be able to handle these hybrid solutions and be able to provide analytics and insight that allows them to be able to manage that unstructured data seamlessly across clouds, across storage infrastructure, across these diverse silos. And that's how Komprise came into being. Now, if you look at what we do, again, simply analytics-driven data management service. You get it up and running in a few minutes. We run this thing, and once you're ready, we run a bunch of VMs in your data center, and now we're able to access your data and get insight into your data, whether it's on a NetApp, an EMC, a Windows file server, Pure, it doesn't matter. SMB, NFS, S3, all the protocols, we go through it. We give you an insight into your data, and we allow you to do what-if experiments. Hey, what if I did this or that? How much would it save me? What would happen? We give you all of that ability. And then with that, you can then create automated policies to manage that data. Because the idea is, when you have billions of files, you can't do this manually. You can't do it as a one-off. It's got to be something that you set it and forget it. And that's what we do. And that's how we move your data. And when I say we move and manage your data, I mean that we're tiering data to the cloud. I mean that you're taking an old file server, migrating data off of that old file server to a new file server. This happens a lot. I mean that you actually do cloud DR or replication from one new file server to another new file server across the river or across a couple of states. So that's, that's the sort of things that we do. And what we're going to present today is that we do this thing, this movement, with zero disruption to your applications and your users. This is this transparent move technology, TMT, that's fundamentally behind what we do. Again, based on what our customers ask for, it's patented and really separates us from the rest of the folks out there. And again, we do this without getting in the hot data path. You don't want to make data, you don't want to store data efficiently at the risk of not being able to access your data. Right? So we are not in the hot data path. It's a risk mitigated approach for managing your data. Finally, the other aspect that we heard and that we're really focused on is that we provide you with the control of your data. No lock-in. So when we move data to somewhere, some cloud, it's in a format that you can use and access from that cloud without us in the picture. So therefore, you're free, you're not locked in. And it allows us to be able to, or allows you, I should say, to be able to then access and use all kinds of applications that run on that storage platform, without us in the picture, so that you can do all kinds of things that you couldn't do before. And finally, I want to bring up that as a part of all this analysis, hot data, cold data, doesn't matter, objects, files, we create a global data lake in the cloud as a service for you automatically, from which you can now actually do all kinds of searches and tags and find the key needle in a haystack, which you could very difficult to do if you had multiple different, data centers, multiple different storage vendors with different kinds of protocols. It's very difficult. Here in one place you go and you can do that. And that's how we're able to create new uses for you. So that's basically what we do. Now, obviously, as I said, we've talked to customers. There's a massive need for this kind of data, or this kind of management, I should say. And that's why we're seeing tremendous market traction. So IBM resells us, HPE resells us, Pure Storage. In fact, they've announced that they have a flash array file solution that they've put out recently. Well, guess what? They use our replication engine to replicate from one flash array file to another flash array file. And their services organization resells Komprise as well. And of course, AWS and Microsoft resell us as well, too. Now, what are the customers that we go after? Typically, these are data-intensive customers. So hospitals with lots of MRIs, universities with a lot of research data, genomics companies, pharma companies, manufacturing, multimedia. These are the sort of companies we go after. Sort of the who's who of customers is what we have. And what better way actually to explain a little bit further what Komprise does by actually talking to you about a particular customer who's using us and going through their use case and their case study. So let's talk about that customer. It's Pfizer. I'm sure you've heard of Pfizer. They're well known. They're a global pharma company, and they've developed a critical COVID vaccine that's probably saved a lot of lives, and they've done it in record time. What you don't know is behind the scenes, they were generating 10 terabytes of research every day. And they had to find a way to manage all that data, all the things that I just talked to you that our customers told us before we started Komprise. And the Pfizer CEO had a mandate: no more data centers. We've got plenty already. We acquire other companies inorganically. We create all kinds of different file servers and vendors and so forth. No more. Find a way and do it such that you do not disrupt the researchers who are developing this vaccine. So the IT was tasked with a rather difficult situation, and they decided that they were going to leverage the cloud. And in this case, they decided to leverage AWS. And so now the thing is, how do we leverage the cloud? How do we move data to that cloud in a way that doesn't disrupt our researchers? Well, they found us, and we came to the picture. And as I mentioned, we began to deploy our stuff. It didn't take very long. And we were able to find, from analyzing their data across their data centers, that the bulk of their data hadn't been touched in a long time. So low-hanging fruit. And in this case of Pfizer, and this is the same with all our customers, in the case of Pfizer, it was about 64% of their data hadn't been touched in over 2 years. And so now low-hanging fruit that we could take, move it to the cloud using our TMT, transparent move technology, to do it transparently, to do it without disruption to the end users and the researchers and their applications. And so we could actually meet their needs. And that's precisely what we did. And you can understand that in a very strict environment, because they had to get that vaccine out. Not only does it mean lives, it meant billions of dollars. So with our analytics, we were able to pick automatically the data that needed to be moved, and then we could move it to the cloud, and again, transparently without the researchers knowing what happened. And so when they looked at this, they actually realized that they actually recouped the cost of Komprise within 90 days, and they had actually saved 75% of their storage costs, which is fantastic. And we'll tell you why so much in a bit. But what's happened was that Matt Bronstein, who was the director for hosting services at Pfizer, was worried that would the researchers be, would they have an allergic reaction to this approach? And what he found was quite the opposite. And the reason for that, again, is the transparency, so that nothing changed for them, nothing changed for their applications. But in addition, they had deep analytics, that global cloud index of all their hot and cold data, which enabled them to do things that they could never do before. So in essence, they were excited about it. And that was absolutely critical. And he understood two more things that I thought was very interesting. One was, he said, it felt like Christmas every morning. So because it was an automated policy, and because every day some more data ages, we were able to find that data automatically and transparently move that to the cloud. And so every day he would see a couple of terabytes moving, and he knew, cha-ching, that was saving money. And the other thing he said, in his 20 years in managing IT, he had never seen the cost of storage go down until Komprise. Okay? So at this point, you've kind of got a sense of the company, what we do. You've kind of gotten a use case. Hopefully you got a better sense of things. I'm going to now talk about our approach to data management and how we kind of got where we got. Again, as I mentioned, we've talked to a lot of customers. But in addition to that, we were looking at what has been happening in the industry when we started. And in this case, we're going to have to go back in time a little bit. If you go back to the 1980s, 1990s, back in the day, we had mostly structured data. We didn't have anywhere near this massive influx of data. Most of your data resided on disk, and when you're done with it, maybe you could push it off to tape. And I call this sort of a unidirectional movement, data movement. And if for any reason you needed it again, you'd bring it off tape, put it back on disk, and process it. So all processing was happening with respect to the disk, the data on the disk. And as a result of that, a storage-centric approach made sense. They were sort of intertwined, disk and data on that disk. If you want to compute, you got to put the data on the disk. So it made sense. A storage-centric data management made sense back in the day. But now if you fast forward to today, what do we have? We've got flash. You can have cheap SATA drive on-premise. You can have object store on-premise. You can have NASs in the cloud. You can have object stores in the cloud, right? Archives, deep archives, and of course there's still tape. So what you can see here is we've got lots and lots of ways of storing your data. And I call these meta tiers of data. And not all of this data is offline. In fact, a lot of them are online. And you can actually do processing there. In fact, in the cloud, you can fire up a bunch of compute resources and do all kinds of things that you can't do in the data center. So this idea that you must put it on disk to do something has suddenly disappeared. And now you want to be able to leverage these different meta tiers of storage and be able to put that data in the right place at the right time, not only for efficiency reasons, but also for extracting value. And to do that, it doesn't make sense to have a storage-centric view of data anymore, or data management anymore. You have to kind of go up a layer and look across these meta tiers and be independent of that. That's how you're going to make this happen. And today, that's what we have today. Imagine what you're going to have tomorrow, right? So that's the way we approached data management. And by the way, we're not the only ones. So I'm going to give a little shout out to Enrico. They put together a giga-ohm radar where they talked about unstructured data management and a layer by itself, that you need to be able to manage this data. And I'd like to thank him for recognizing us as one of the de facto leaders in that space, which is fantastic. But now, more and more people are joining that bandwagon. If you look at it, Just recently, Gartner put out a hybrid cloud storage market report, in which case, for the very first time, they recognized that data management software is a layer independent of storage arrays and independent of software-defined storage. It was fantastic to see that. So things are moving. People are getting to see it and understand it. And now it's becoming much more obvious as we go to these meta tiers of storage, which don't just provide storage, but can also provide compute and processing. So, all right, we've talked about data management, talked about how it needs to be an independent layer, talked about how there's a bandwagon of people talking this way, which is fantastic. And again, what's the benefit? The benefits are that one, you can, by looking at the whole infrastructure, the whole environment, you can do a much better job of cost efficiency and storage efficiency. And the other is you can do things you could never do before. I've given you that example with respect to Pfizer and how the researchers are going in and leveraging this. And let me just talk a little bit about the cost efficiency aspect. So if you look at that, here's a typical environment. You've got some storage. You probably have some DR of that storage. You're probably keeping at least 2 or 3 or 4 backup copies of that storage. And if you look at this entire environment, I would say somewhere between 20–30% of the cost is in the storage. So now if you go in there and focus on storage efficiency and storage tiering, you can impact that 20%. But what about the rest? Why can't you not look at it from a complete perspective? And that's what you do with data management, because there's 80% left to be done. And with data management, you're looking at the whole thing, and thereby you can actually bring in significant more cost savings. And again, that's how Pfizer was able to get a 75% cost savings using Komprise, because they were looking at the whole infrastructure. So with that, I just want to end with what we think are the 5 principles of an analytics-centric data management platform.
Komprise doesn't actually do backup or DR support directly, right? I mean, you're just providing the information that maybe allows that to be more efficient or effective?
Yes. Yeah, we don't provide backup. A lot of people do use us for their own form of cloud DR by putting things in the cloud and then being able to recall it. But you're exactly right. We enable and make these things more efficient by the way in which we move data and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so coming.
Yeah, I was just going to add there, the key, I think the point Kumar was making is storage is a part of the equation, but the active management of the data is the bigger cost. And when we take data, when we take a cold file out of storage, we also take it out of the active backup and DR and can move it to, for example, if you take it from a file storage and we move it to an object store in the cloud, you are getting a geo redundancy in the object store. And that's a form of protection for that unchanging data, which may be sufficient. So we're not only right placing the storage, we're also right placing the backup and the DR. And that's why we're able to impact the whole cost, not just the storage costs.
I got you. Thanks.
All right. So again, go beyond storage. Think beyond storage as a critical principle. The other is sort of be multi-directional. So as I mentioned to you, go from disk to tape and back again. To me, that's unidirectional. The idea now is that imagine that you're going to the cloud. You can go to multiple layers in the cloud, so like ILM. You can go pop it back up and recall it to the storage, primary storage on-premise, or you could take it to a cloud NAS. So there's all kinds of directions that you could go, and you need to be able to think along those lines. And of course, probably one of the most important is not disrupt the users and their workflows. So in some ways, create a level of data virtualization. But data virtualization hasn't done very well, typically because they're usually on top of all your data and everything goes through it. And so that doesn't work, and customers don't want that. So we've come up with a way to be able to be on the side and provide a certain level of data virtualization. I think this is important to be able to move from meta-tier to meta-tier without the users having to figure out where your data is today. They shouldn't be chasing the data. The data should be available to them where they're used to seeing it. And the other, of course, is it's not just about storage efficiencies. It's about creating new uses for your data. So being open and being able to leverage the new technologies that are coming today. I showed you the big difference from 1990 to today. Imagine what 10 years is going to bring. So you do not want to be managing your data in a way that locks you into today, because tomorrow is going to be vastly different. That's important. And the final point that I wanted to make is that you want to put your data first. You want to be data-centric. Focus on what the data needs. Understand the data's usage patterns and put it in the right place at the right time as you need it. That's fundamental to proper data management, which is a separate layer from everything else.